Stand on the walls of York today and you're standing in the footsteps of Roman soldiers, Viking traders, medieval kings, and modern survivors of war. Few cities in Europe carry this many centuries without breaking. York wasn't just built once, it was rebuilt again and again, conquered, burned, divided, and bombed. Yet it never disappeared. This is the story of York. 2,000 years, one city. It begins in 71 AD. Roman legions push north into hostile Britain and stop where two rivers meet, the Ouse and the Foss. They build a fortress and call it Ebrickim. What starts as timber walls becomes stone barracks, temples, bathhouses, and administration buildings. 5,000 soldiers of the 9th Legion make it their home, and then, mysteriously, vanish from history. The 6th Legion replaces them, and York grows into one of the most important cities in Roman Britain. Emperors walk these streets. Septimius Severus dies here in 211. In 306, Constantine is proclaimed emperor by his troops in York, a decision that will reshape the Roman world and eventually legitimize Christianity. By the time Rome withdraws from Britain, York is no longer just a fortress. It's a religious and political center. The empire fades, the walls crumble, but people remain. The Anglo-Saxons inherit the city and rename it Historyofyork. In 627, King Edwin of Northumbria is baptized in a small wooden church, a moment that spreads Christianity across the north. York rises again, becoming an archbishopric and a center of learning. Scholars like Alcuin turn the city into one of Europe's intellectual beacons during an age many call the Dark Ages. But across the North Sea, new ships are coming. In 866, Viking longships slip up the river at dawn. The great heathen army captures the city and renames it Jorvik. This isn't just a raid, it's a reinvention. Viking families settle here. Craftsmen fill narrow streets with metalwork, leather, and trade goods. York becomes a bustling Norse capital connected to Dublin and Scandinavia. Archaeology will later reveal perfectly preserved Viking streets buried beneath the modern city. But Viking rule is unstable. Kings rise and fall violently, and in 950 for the last Viking ruler, Eric Bloodaxe, dies in battle. York returns to English control, briefly. Then comes 1066, the most famous year in English history. Near York, King Harold Godwinson defeats a Norwegian invasion at Stamford Bridge, ending the Viking Age. But days later, he marches south to face William of Normandy and dies at Hastings. William arrives in York soon after and builds a castle to secure his rule. The people rebel, killing the Norman garrison. William responds with terrifying force. The harrying of the north devastates Yorkshire villages burned, fields destroyed, thousands starving. York survives, but the message is clear: resistance will be crushed. The city rebuilds, trade flourishes, and York Minster grows from a wooden church into a grand stone cathedral. Pilgrims arrive to visit the tomb of St. William, yet York's wealth hides darker moments. In 1190, anti-Jewish violence erupts, and members of the Jewish community seeking refuge in Clifford's Tower are killed in one of the most tragic events in the city's history. Despite this, York rises to new power. In 1212, it gains self-governing status, effectively becoming an independent city within England. Wealth flows from the wool trade. King Edward I even moves the English government here while campaigning against Scotland, turning York into a temporary capital. But glory never lasts forever. In 1349, the Black Death arrives. Within months, a third or more of the population dies. Streets fall silent, workshops close, and the city struggles to recover. As England descends into the Wars of the Roses, York finds itself at the heart of a dynastic struggle. The white rose of the House of York flies from its walls. 3 Yorkist kings take the throne, including Richard III, a ruler many in the north admire as a champion of their region. Meanwhile, construction of York Minster finally reaches completion in 1472, after more than 2 centuries. But in 1485, Richard III dies at the Battle of Bosworth, and the Tudor dynasty takes power. York loses its political influence, entering a new and uncertain age. The Reformation tears the city apart. Cardinal Wolsey, once Archbishop of York and the king's chief minister, falls from power. Monasteries are dissolved, ancient religious houses stripped and abandoned. The Pilgrimage of Grace rebellion rises in the north but is crushed. Catholics practice their faith in secret, risking execution. One of the most powerful stories comes from Margaret Clitheroe, a butcher, his wife who refuses to betray hidden priests and is pressed to death in 1586. Her sacrifice becomes a lasting symbol of faith and resistance. Civil war returns in the 17th century. York declares for King Charles I and endures an 11-week siege by parliamentarian forces. Outside the walls, the Battle of Marston Moor becomes one of the largest clashes ever fought on English soil. The Royalists are defeated, and York surrenders. The age of kings ruling without challenge is coming to an end. By the 18th century, York begins to change. Public executions still draw crowds, including that of the infamous highwayman, Dick Turpin, in 1739. But the city is becoming fashionable rather than war-torn. Horse racing, theatres, and social gatherings redefine its identity. York is slowly transforming from a battlefield into a cultural destination. The 19th century brings both destruction and renewal. In 1829, a fire started by a religious fanatic devastates part of York Minster, yet the cathedral is rebuilt. The Yorkshire Museum opens, reflecting a growing desire to preserve the past. Then, in 1839, the railway arrives. Entrepreneur George Hudson turns York into a railway hub, connecting it to London and the industrial north. The population surges, tourists arrive, and the ancient city steps into the modern world. York's history of survival is tested again during World War II. In 1942, German bombers target the city in a Baedeker raid, aiming to destroy Britain's cultural heritage rather than its industry. Incendiary bombs ignite medieval streets, and historic buildings burn. The minster itself is struck, but volunteers climb onto the roof during the air raid and extinguish the flames. 92 people die that night, yet York endures once more. After the war, the city reinvents itself yet again. The University of York brings new generations of students. The National Railway Museum celebrates its Victorian legacy. The Jorvik Viking Centre allows visitors to walk through reconstructed Viking streets, proving that York's greatest asset is its own past. Even lightning striking the minster in 1984, causing another devastating fire, cannot stop the cycle of rebuilding. 2,000 years, Roman emperors, Viking kings, medieval saints, rebels, martyrs, railway magnates, and ordinary people who refused to abandon their city. York has been a fortress, a capital, a battlefield, and now one of the most historic destinations in Britain. Because in York, history isn't buried. It's layered beneath every street, every stone, every step you take along the walls. And that is why this city still stands. But York's story isn't finished. Every year, millions of footsteps echo across stones laid down long before the modern world existed. Tourists walk the shambles with cameras in hand, often unaware that beneath them lie Viking workshops, Roman roads, and centuries of forgotten lives. Students cycle past medieval gates on their way to lectures about the future, while archaeologists quietly uncover pieces of the past just a few streets away. What makes York different isn't just its age, its continuity. Most ancient cities were abandoned, rebuilt elsewhere, or swallowed by industry. York stayed. It adapted without losing itself. The walls still circle the city. The minster still dominates the skyline. And the rivers that first drew Roman soldiers here continue to flow exactly as they did 2 millennia ago. History here doesn't feel distant. It feels close enough to touch. A reminder that cities are more than buildings. They are memories carried forward by generations who choose to rebuild instead of walk away. York survived empire, invasion, fire, plague, and war. And as long as people keep walking these streets, its story will keep growing. One more chapter added to a history that never truly ends. Let me know in the comments what you think about this, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.